Hello, everyone. Starting here on time, 9 p.m. in the East. Let me move this here a little bit. 9 p.m. here in the eastern part of the United States. I don't know where you are, but wherever you are, I'm happy that you are tuning in for Unfound Live for January, what is today? January 2nd, 3rd, 5th of 2026. The first live for this year. One of what will surely be many shows for this year. And I'm messing around with this microphone. So just bear with me a moment. You want to see mine? I think all of you can still hear me just fine. Maybe I'll turn this like that just a bit. All right. Still fiddling around. 8 years into this live show, and I'm still fiddling around with how this microphone should be. That's pretty funny. I'm hoping all of you had a great New Year's. I'm going to get to my New Year's here in a moment. I have a fantastic show lined up for you tonight. If you are looking at the title for this live show, maybe you can already tell that it's going to be spectacular. I'm going to talk about the disappearance of Abbie Flynn. This seems appropriate now that we are going to be starting the NFL playoffs this coming weekend. She is the woman out of Massachusetts who disappeared on Super Bowl Sunday of 2020, I think it was. You remember she was having a party. People were coming over. She was there by herself. They show up. She's not there. There's food in the oven. Nowhere to be seen. I am going to analyze that disappearance tonight. Also want to talk about this murder that has occurred. A dentist and his wife in Columbus, Ohio, a city that we've visited a few times for disappearances. Brian Schaefer, Jamie Bowen, just to name a couple. Going to take a look at that. Of course, murder's not necessarily my thing, but it's been in the news, so might as well talk about it at least a little bit. Maybe I can analyze it from a disappearance point of view. Fortunately for them, of course, they are both deceased, but their children were unharmed. And then I want to talk a little bit about this woman who was identified after many years. Remains were found, unknown remains for a while, and then recently she was identified. I want to take a look at that. And of course, as is always the situation, I have other things that I can talk about should I have time left there at the end. We shall see. We know that when I start getting into any analysis of a disappearance like I've done on the live show, pretty much starting last summer, the summer of 2025, that analysis can go for a little while. It is my bread and butter, right? And I try to leave no stone unturned. So it stands to reason that would usually make up the majority of any live show that I'm going to do, where I pick out the disappearance. And I try to, of course, pick out some disappearances. All of them have not yet been featured on Unfound, of course, but ones that I think are kind of in the public sphere. I try not to come to this live show where I'm going to analyze a disappearance that is just a very obscure one. I really take a lot of pride when it comes to the podcast, making those obscure ones known to everybody, very much like what we did this past Friday with the disappearance of Sylvia Lewowski. Of course, over 50 years since she went missing from Staten Island. But when it comes to the Unfound Live ones, I do try to pick each one from a standpoint of, well, that this has been out there, and maybe even some other podcasts or YouTube channels have taken a look at them, but I have not yet done so. So Abbie Flynn will be the topic when I get to that. As you are watching or listening out there, I hope you will give this show a thumbs up. I ask this every week, but just got to do that. Give this show a thumbs up. Share it if you are not yet a subscriber to the channel. And my perception is that Sylvia Lewalski's disappearance, at least on YouTube, has got, for it only being up there for a few days, has already gotten a few comments, quite a few comments, and maybe bringing some new people for whatever reason to Unfound. It's caught some attention out there somewhere. New people. So if you are one of those new people, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down there in the bottom right-hand corner. In addition, there are a variety of ways you can contribute here. And I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but Assistant Emily, just this morning, she and I were talking about somebody else who, maybe goes a little overboard when it comes to requesting that people contribute. And we had an interesting discussion about that. Some other host of another podcast, I want to be very vague on this, podcast, YouTube show, something along those lines, that really, really, really hammers hey, you got to contribute, I'm working hard here, that type of thing. I don't do that here. But on the other hand, I'm very honest, like I was for the update episode to finish off 2025, that this never get the idea that this podcast makes a ton of money. It does not. Despite what you may be seeing about some podcast hosts out there creating their $100 million true crime empires, that is certainly not what we are doing here. And that's why I don't worry about such things. As you know, my concern is covering these disappearances as well as we can. And it means much more to me if we can assist in the solving of them than trying to make a lot of money. I'm just going to be honest. That's where I am. That's where I am over 9 years into this. But if you like what we do here, do not hesitate to support, what myself, Eric, Emily, Carrie, Cherie do in their own ways. Really appreciate it. So who is in here, by the way? Who is in here tonight? Pookly. Wow, Pookly in an early 5 o'clock. All right. 4 hours early, Pookly. Nicely done. Pookly really wanted to be number one tonight. Ghost of Burger King passed. I don't even know what that means. 3 hours ago. Charlie's busy tonight at work. He'll be back later. Okay. Hello, Michelle. Happy New Year to you. D, how are you? The Cake. Derek, Happy New Year to you. Leanne. Husafel, I guess. Hey, well, Happy New Year to you. Mary, always spectacular. New Year, we started for this missing Native and First American. Thank you, D. Lisa and I had a fun conversation for a short time last night over Messenger, talking about the Steeler game last night. Good evening, and everyone. About to take some NyQuil and crash. Oh, yeah, you're still sick, Lisa. Sorry to hear that. Yeah. Amy, what's going on? Glenn. Wow, Glenn is here. Glenn, it's been a while. I know you've been busy. Where you been? From Michigan. Good to see you, Glenn. First time in a while. Really miss you in the think tank, too. D, Michelle, the guest on Sylvia's episode was fantastic. Yep. I agree. A lot of people noticed that. D. Oh, that sounds like all YouTube I know. First, people requesting. All right, D. Mary was great. Yes, Michelle. Amy agrees with Michelle. Yeah. Yes. And Glenn is in residency in Michigan. And you're working very hard, Glenn. I certainly could not do anything in the medical field. No way. Husafel says Steelers got lucky with that missed field goal. Well, I agree. In fact, maybe that's where I should start off the intro, just kind of what's going on since we all got together last Monday. Yeah, last night was crazy. I watched the first half of the game here down in the gym. I've made a commitment. Been actually hitting, I'm going to get into kind of, as it says in the intro for this show tonight, that, I need to take my fitness a little more seriously in 2026. So I actually watched the first half of last night's game down in my gym, the gym that's in this building, down there by myself. And boy, do I love that. It's like my own personal gym. And so I watched the first half and then came up here to watch the second half. And yes, it was certifiably crazy. Hello, Brian. What's going on? Hello, Brian. Good to see you. All right, it's Brian. And it was crazy. Either team could have won that game. But I will tell you, and of course, I'm a Steelers fan, not as big a Steeler fan as I used to be. Used to go crazy for them during the games. I'd wear a Steelers shirt or I'd go to a Steelers bar and all those things. And I think it's a variety of things. A little burnout, a little, it gets a little mindless after a while. I think with my personality, sometimes in rooting for a team and being with a group, it sometimes feels, for my personality, a little too cultish. In addition, just really in my life, I tend to be very, very objective about things. And so, to be really into a team, as with any team in any sport, you have to think, well, the refs are against us and that call didn't go our way and we don't get enough respect. Those are things that if you are part of a fan base for a team, those are things you have to buy into, which is kind of the antithesis of who I am. And so I still follow them. I just don't get as emotionally engaged anymore. I did enjoy watching last night. Watching Ravens Steelers brings me back to like the heydays of the 2000s when I was really into it, when I lived in Las Vegas. And Troy Polamalu returning that interception for a touchdown, and them going to the Super Bowl coincidentally right here in Tampa. I didn't even live here yet. It brings back a lot of great memories of some games, but I'm just a little over it. I'm just more of a casual Steeler fan now. If somebody gave me tickets to go to a game, absolutely, I would go, even if it was in the cold, just for the experience. But, like I said, it just gets a little too cultish and mindless after a while. And those are two things I am not. So really, 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 really not in any part of my life. So, but I enjoyed it. When the kicker missed the field goal, certainly I was happy about that. But I have to say, I'm trying to be objective here. I really do think the better team won. The Steelers had got the one turnover, and surely in the first half, the Ravens, ran the ball. But in the second half, even though I know the Steelers defense made a couple really big errors, I really do think the better team won. that doesn't mean the Steelers are good. In fact, I made the comment last night on Facebook that either one, like going back to 2008 when the Steelers went to the Super Bowl and beat the Cardinals, that particular year, the games between the Ravens and the Steelers, all three of them were epic. Epic, just kind of like last night, except those teams back then were actually really, really good. They were two of those, but when they played, you felt like it was the Super Bowl. Nobody watching that game last night is thinking, oh, yeah, this is like really the Super Bowl. These are the two best teams in the league. Surely not. And so I try to keep that in mind. It was a battle between two mediocre teams, in contrast to back in the day, a battle between probably the two best teams in the league. Except maybe you have to throw the Patriots in there too, of course. But the Steelers, beat the Patriots a few times, even with Tom Brady, and the Ravens certainly did as well. So, but it was fun. It was fun. And yes, I was happy that the guy missed the field goal. And so they'll play again next Monday night. In fact, I can already tell all of you right now, the live show for next week will not be on Monday because the Steelers will be playing this time next week. Probably going to move the live show next week to Tuesday. So you can put that in your calendars. Let's see what everybody very close was. Greek Crank. Oh, and the Bears are choking. Yeah, it's kind of been their thing for a while. Cranky for a while. D. No, I know my teams suck. I'm a Cowboys and OU for college. Yeah, the Cowboys. Not good. That's okay. I'm only a Bears fan in the chat tonight. All right, Cranky. Hello, LaFord. Wow. In the think tank last night and live show tonight, LaFord. Great. I'm going to say it again. Great to see you. Great to see you. What do you mean, why, D? What are you asking me, why? Sometimes when I see these questions, it's not for a couple minutes. What do you mean by why? Why what there, D? By the way, D and I did a show last Thursday night. Enjoyed it quite a bit. So that was last night. We'll do it all again next Monday night when the Texans go to Pittsburgh. I think the Texans have to be favored, which makes sense to me. But right now, I have to move it to Tuesday. Maybe that's why I don't know now. Okay, D. Why am I going to move? Why I'm going to move the live show? Because I'd like to watch the Steeler game next Monday night. So that's why. Other things, New Year's, didn't do anything. Stayed here. I was up at midnight. Took a video of all of the fireworks displays. I could see like 50 of them all happening at one time. I took a video. Go to my personal Facebook page if you'd like to see that. That is not CGI or anything. That was all real. Going the whole way along the horizon, looking over in the direction of Tampa, which is way over there, but mainland Pinellas County, and looking east, like 50 different displays. But it was a work day for me. New Year's Eve was a work day. New Year's Day was a work day. Cooked some of the steaks that my sister sent me for Christmas. That was good. Just really didn't do anything at all. Just hung out here by myself, which is fine. As far as trivia, I went on Saturday. I wouldn't necessarily say we got our butts kicked, but we didn't come in the top three. It was, could we have done better? Maybe, but maybe we could have come in the top three. I don't know if we were going to win on Saturday, but that's with the team, the one team, the new team that I'm playing with every week over at Finley's for the season. You might remember we missed being in the playoffs by 3 points. That starts again on Wednesday. I will be there. And so I will be joining them for another season, and we'll see if we can get into the playoffs. Once again, this is a new team. Remember my old team, we used to win all the time, and it got, let's just say, quite easy. But those people have moved on. They're going to play somebody else, somewhere else now. and I'm staying here at Finley's, kind of challenging myself, joining another team which hasn't won a lot, but their finish of sixth out of 20-some teams was their best showing ever over at Finley's for an entire season, which is 3 months. So I think they were pretty psyched up about that, but we should have made the playoffs. But that will start on Wednesday. And the other thing is, as I've already kind of alluded to, going to the gym, making a real commitment to, I've always committed to my health. In fact, I went and got my blood tested on Friday, and that's a story within itself, where the person, when she put the needle in, missed my vein or artery on my arm, and I knew it that she did, and she had to take it out and put the needle back in. It didn't hurt or anything, but the whole thing, the whole process anyway, always weirds me out, and I get a little nervous anxiety about the whole thing, so that didn't help. But she finally did it, and it was done. I was fine, but my blood work is better now. Now, granted, I take some pills and things daily, but my blood work is better now at 55 than it was at 45. And that's just with the addition of a little bit of generic Lipitor. And I also take a vitamin D every day, and I take some fish oil every day. That alone causes my triglycerides and the LDL, bad cholesterol and everything, to be better now than it was 10 years ago. Because I can look at, because I've been going to the same blood place for like over 10 years. So I can see what my, it's been for like over 10 years. You can look back 10 years into the past. And so, that way I'm pretty good. But making a commitment here in 2026 to, as far as my weight and eating better and things. I know a lot of people do that and don't follow through. I really think that I'm going to follow through with this. Just to give you an example, I'm 5'9", very average height guy. I know most of you have not met me in person. You don't know how tall I am or anything. I'm just 5'9", very, very average. And I'm fairly muscular. There was a time in my life where I lifted a lot of weights, especially, going back to my Vegas days. So I'm fairly muscular. So even if I were perfect, I'm probably going to weigh a little bit more than, because of, muscle weighs more than fat, et cetera, all that. So I'm always going to weigh a little bit more than an average height 55-year-old white guy who's 5'9", just because I've probably hit the weights than the average guy. But still, I'm 5'9", and my waist, when you measure it right at my belly button, is like 36.5, it's not good. I'm not fat. If you see me, you're like, well, yeah, you're not fat. You look spectacular. Yeah, but. So my body mass index probably, when they say your fat percentage or whatever, is probably around 20%. I would like to get it down to maybe 12 or 13%, which would mean losing about 4.5 inches of that waist measurement, so 36.5 down to about 32. And that should put me down to losing about at least 10 pounds. So getting down to like maybe 12 pounds, like down to 172, 171, somewhere in there. So I've put myself on a plan, and I'm following through with it. And one of those things is I have to walk 8,000 steps every day. And I'm only allowed to eat between 9:30 and 6:30 every day. So I'm fasting from 6:30 in the evening till 9:30 the next day. and 8,000 steps, which is roughly around walking for an hour. So every day now I've been walking for an hour down in the gym. And so this, along with a new lifting weights and everything, I think in 6 months I should be there. We'll see. So that is my commitment here in 2026. Some of you don't know this, but back in my 30s, I was actually a model in Las Vegas. Like going back to the Star Trek days, if they needed any pictures taken for the experience and everything, I was usually one of the people, the guys that got picked. And so I did some other things regarding that in Las Vegas. And so there's, I can be vain at times. Not that I can look like I did when I was in my 30s, but I can do better. It's always one of those things. I'm never happy with things. So I can do better. And this is something, of course, last year it was all about sleep. Because this time last year, it was not fun. This year, it's all about looking better and losing some weight and everything. Because once again, blood-wise, I'm really, really good for my age. So there you go. I wanted to talk about that. Maybe that will give some of you the same motivation for 2026. And I realize you can do this at any time, and New Year's resolutions are overrated, yada, yada, yada. But still, any time is a good time. And this is the time that I've decided to work on this. So we'll see. I'll let you know how it goes. And like I said, so the goal is to get down to between 170 and 172 pounds, which means I'm going to have to lose like 10 to 12 pounds and get down at least the measurement around where my belly button is to about 32, which means losing about 4.5 inches of my waist. Totally, totally doable. And at the same time, not just fasting, but working weights and stuff at the same time. And there's only so many hours in a day, so you may be wondering, well, what's going to have to take a back seat? A little bit of my disc golf is going to have to take a back seat. Just is. That's my priority for this year. And my singing, of course, which is going well. Continue to learn a lot of things about it. We'll see what I do with that in 2026. That is something that I will be hitting as hard as ever as well. Brian, thank you. You can do it. Thank you. I appreciate it. All of you can do it too. If any of you are hearing what I'm saying and saying, man, that sounds a little bit like me, you can do it too. You can do it. All right, let's get to the true crime part of tonight's part of tonight's show for the next hour and a half. One thing, I'm going to get to Abbie Flynn first, I guess, like 1B. But I do need to mention something if any of you are confused. Of course, there is a new Unfound Now episode out, and it was public for a while. And then it's still out there, but it's unlisted. I can't get into the specific reasons why that is, but it will be made public soon. I'm not going to pick a day out or anything, but ran into a couple complications in the publishing of it. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not getting into the specifics, but I believe it's a good episode, and I'm just going to let it chill as being unlisted. So if you got the link in the discussion group or something, that link still works. It's still out there. It's just you can't see it. You can't search for it. So for the public, if you're not subscribed to the channel, even if you're subscribed to the channel, it's not going to show up. You have to be a member of the discussion group because that's where the link is. So if you're wondering about that, well, Ed said, and yes, I got it done and I recorded it and I think it's awesome. But like I said, after the fact, just a couple things popped up And so we're going to leave it unlisted for now. You can do it. LaFord, stay consistent in the gym. LaFord, I'm going to do that. Thank you. D. Ed, did you make a no-no? I didn't do a no-no. No. Nothing. No. I put it unlisted to help out somebody else, D. That's all I'm going to say. For me, I really don't care one way or the other, but to help out somebody who I respect, I'm going to keep it unlisted for now. All I can say. So like I said, if anybody's confused, well, I thought he said, well, it was up, and then we had to change a couple things. The episode is that as it is, just had to make it unlisted again. All I can say. Let's talk, or I'll talk, about Abbie Flynn. Anybody wants to jump in the comments as I go through this? You know, sometimes these things take a half hour, 40 minutes for me to go through the entirety of it. Of course, anytime you want to have any comments, any questions about what I'm talking about, I will try to keep my eyes on the comments section as best as I can. But Abbie Flynn, this is a disappearance that is coming up on being 6 years old. As I stated at the beginning of the show tonight, I thought it was appropriate to now talk about her disappearance. I know that I spoke about it when it first occurred back in 2020 on that live show, surely back then, because it did get some national attention. But really, since then, it's kind of everything's died back down. There has been some coverage, I think, on some YouTube channels, some podcasts, but really, there has been no new news on her disappearance since it happened. I mean, it was in the news. Oh, wow, this happened and she's missing and they're doing this. And there's been nothing new since. Certainly people still talking about it. You can go to like Web Sleuths and see a very, very, very long thread on it. But as far as a lot of opinions out there, but actual facts, nothing since it happened. So that's what I'm limited to when I'm discussing and analyzing Abbie's disappearance tonight. But like I said, here we are now into NFL playoff season, and she went missing during Super Bowl Sunday back in 2020. And so this is probably a good time to give this a shot. Certainly want to hear what all of you, or want to read what all of you have to say. So I'm going to read this article. She is, of course, on NamUs, but Abbie is not on the Charlie Project. And I was a little surprised by that. Really, really didn't get into the weeds on why that is. Did not message Megan on that. But you would think a disappearance like this. I'm going to double check that. I mean, I know I checked it early, when I was putting together the show earlier today over at this new coffee shop that I'm going to, that I am loving, by the way. It's not a very long drive, spectacular location. I'm glad I started going to this place. I would recommend this place highly. Oh, there she is. Yeah, she is on there, but just to be clear, she's known as Mary Abbie Flynn, whereas I think everybody just called her Abbie, I think. So if you're going to look for her, you just can't put in, if you put in Flynn and you're looking for a first name Abbie, her real first name is actually Mary. So, all right, now that all is making sense to me. All right, Mary Abbie Flynn, her disappearance. There's several articles. This is an article that was written at the time. Like I said, there's no new news since this article was written, and I could have picked any article written back at the time, and they all basically, a lot of different sources, but they all say basically the same thing. Police in Massachusetts are looking for a 59-year-old woman, 59-year-old at the time, not 59, she's like 65 now, who vanished on Super Bowl Sunday just hours before she was set to host friends for a party. The cell phone of Abbie Flynn was still on the counter, so the place in your kitchen, When her friends came by her Gloucester home, I think that's how you pronounce it, Gloucester. It's not Gloucester, it's Gloucester. Home at 6 p.m. on February 2nd, so Groundhog Day. And there was food in the oven, but Flynn was nowhere to be found, the Houston Chronicle reported, and I'll get into why it's the Houston Chronicle. 2 concerned guests called police, and 1 day later, the Gloucester Police Department issued a public plea for help in finding the mother of 3. Gloucester Chief of Police Ed Conley told the outlet that Flynn spoke to her son around 4 p.m., so 2 hours before these people were to be there for the party. And when does the Super Bowl usually start? 6:30, 7 p.m. Eastern time? It may vary depending on where they are playing the Super Bowl. That occurs to me. On Sunday, and told him she was going for a walk. She was last seen around 4:30, possibly wearing a blue puffy jacket, police said. I'll come back to that. So we have an eyewitness. We're working primarily under the theory that she did what she said she was going to do, so go for this walk, and perhaps either got lost, that would seem unlikely, or had a medical incident, the chief of police said. Authorities have since conducted extensive searches of the paths and woods around the area where she went missing, and have also searched the coastline. Because if you take a look at this, and look at the map, the house is on a peninsula, a fairly large peninsula. And so from where she was at this house, she could go like a half mile, to the west and get to the water, or a half mile east and get to the water. Going to the west would take her to like a large bay. Going to the east would actually take her to the Atlantic Ocean, just to give you an idea. Of course, there's many houses. It's not overtly populated. This isn't New York City, but it's a neighborhood. There's houses that are fairly close to each other. As of Monday, the search has been suspended, though a dive team from the Massachusetts State Police will soon take to the waters nearby to look for Flynn. Police have said they have no reason to believe foul play was involved in her disappearance. Flynn's brother, Brian, who lives in Bermuda, so the island, told Dateline that he was in California visiting his son when Flynn's husband, Rich, called him and told him she was missing. As soon as I got the call, my son drove me straight to the airport, and I was at her house by 10 a.m. the next morning, Brian said, the brother. We're all in shock. This is just heartbreaking for all of us. Abbie Flynn, a retired nurse, grew up in Gloucester and currently splits her time between the city and Houston, where her husband, Rich, is a radiologist. Brian reportedly told Dateline that Rich was in Houston when his wife went missing, but immediately flew to Gloucester to the East Coast. They have a wonderful life and are really just happy, her brother said. It doesn't make sense that she would just walk away. He also praised his sister as the most caring and selfless mother, friend, and sister, and said 2 of her adult children are away at college while the other lives in New York. Anyone with information as to Flynn's whereabouts is asked to call the Gloucester Police Department at 978-283-1212. This article was written back in 2020. I'm guessing that phone number is still good today. 978-283-1212. All right, so we have this woman who is at home by herself. And then what's important to understand is she and her husband had 2 homes. They primarily lived in Houston, Texas. But she was originally from Gloucester. They still have a house there. She loves her time being there, even though it's winter up there, even though it's cold and snowy. And this was not, from what I can tell, an unusual situation. It seems that everybody in her family, reading other articles, there was nothing unusual about this. They weren't, he wasn't in Houston and she was there because they were having marriage problems or anything like that. Nobody has said anything like that. And hello, fishing. Hey, Ed, late. Sorry. That's fine, fishing. I'm the only one that's not allowed to be late. So you have to understand this. This is not a situation where she and her husband were living alone in Massachusetts and then he just happened to be out of town when this happened. It's not what happened. All right. Primarily living in Houston. She's from there. She wanted to go up there. And there's nobody saying that this was because of some marriage problem. And as it says in the article, the husband has an alibi of being, what is that, 2,000 miles from Massachusetts to Texas. And of course, if they were having marriage problems, could he have found a hitman or something? I guess. I don't know if there's any facts to support that. I just want you to understand, when you hear Houston Chronicle, why the Houston Chronicle in Texas writing about this disappearance, it's because primarily for their adult lives and being married, they were in Houston. And this was like a summer home or a winter home. Might have been a home that that her family passed down through the generations. I don't know. So there's that. Hello, Sage. Like, I used to be a band in high school called Sage. You might find that interesting. True story. With my good best friends, the Story brothers, at least two of them. The band was called Sage. Still a fantastic band name. All right, so that's the setup. She's supposed to have this Super Bowl party. She's there alone. She has people she knows, friends. Who these people actually are, not sure. Maybe their names are out there somewhere. I don't know if that matters or not. But they're supposed to come over. I don't know how many people were supposed to come over. They get there. Guess knock on the door. She doesn't answer. I guess the door was unlocked or something. They go in. Nobody's there. There's food in the oven. There's no signs of violence. The car is there. And eventually, as they should have, they called 911, which was good on their part. Luckily, they didn't say, oh, well, we'll just leave. Luckily, they did the right thing. As I already stated, there's a long thread on Web Sleuths about this, a lot of speculation, but I will continue to insist. There are no new facts on this disappearance since it happened. Very important. I'm going to keep saying that, no matter what you might hear about out there. And so all I can do is look at the facts of this. As I've already also stated, there have been suspicions directed at the husband. Nobody has broken his alibi, saying, oh, no, he really wasn't in Texas. I think everybody is satisfied that he was in Texas. That, of course, does not mean he could have instigated something with somebody else. But a lot of suspicions of him at the beginning, at least as far as I can tell, looking at the most recent Web Sleuths threads, the last couple, that stuff seems to have died down, as I think it should. I find that to be sensible. So once again, the Massachusetts home, not their main house. It was their vacation home or just some place they went when they had their free time. So as I usually do, Brian says, who knows, she went for a walk. Well, that's what she told, according to the story, Brian, that's what she told her son she was going to do. That her son, Brian, Mary said, well, I'm going to get into all this. These are very good questions. Who knows, she went for a walk. Well, that's what she said she was going to do. And who puts food in the oven and takes a walk? I'm going to get to that too, Mary. So here are some of the things, as I usually do. What I first do when I'm analyzing these disappearances for the live show, if you're new, is I first pick out what else I would like to know regarding her, the situation, things that I think might help us better analyze. Of course, the big question is, well, what happened? But as far as looking at the situation, the circumstances of the disappearance, the missing person herself, these are some more things that I would like to know. So, for example, if I were to talk to somebody in her family and have them on Unfound, these would be some of the questions that I would be asking them right away when we had that first conversation, of course, that none of you ever hear. It's off the record. It's just a way for me to collect information. If you don't know what I do, I first talk to the future guest. I record that conversation, and then I sit there and take notes. I listen to the entire conversation again, take my notes, and that's how the process always gets started. So these are some of the questions I would be asking that family member should I get to talk to one of them. Maybe I will one of these days. So what I would still like to know, how often did she go walking? Was this something, given that this was early 2020, of course, this is right before COVID, is this something that she just picked up? Like maybe myself and a lot of people are doing right now, New Year's resolutions. Is this just something she started doing? Or was this something that she'd been doing for a while? She was a big time, loved to go out and take a nice afternoon, early evening walk. I think this is very important. Of course, what else I'd like to know is, did she take the same route every time? For me, now that I'm into walk, getting in my steps every day, I'm not much of a go out there in public and walk. Walking on the sidewalk, the cars going by and everything. I don't know. I really trust drivers out there, me walking along the sidewalk like that, to be honest. So I just go down to the gym and hit the treadmill. I know that for a lot of people, that's boring. But I get my headphones on, I get my music going. I start listening to maybe Jason Blair's podcast or the Console podcast or the Steelers podcast or a U.S. men's national soccer team podcast. The time goes by really fast for me. Other people not like that. But I'm a treadmill guy. But it seems, I don't know if she had a treadmill or not, it seems she liked to go out and walk in the neighborhood or something. But did she take the same route every time? Was it the same length? Was it always 30 minutes or 45 minutes? Or did she go just by, the length, instead of going by time, she was actually going by distance? This is something that I think would also help us understand. Well, she tells her son she's going for a walk. What does that exactly mean? Because for every person, it's going to be a little different. I tell my dad I'm going to go walk. I'm going down to the gym. For her, obviously, it was something different. Thank you, Laura. Yes, everybody hit the thumbs up as you are watching tonight. Cranky says treadmill and Slayer. I'm not a Slayer fan, Cranky. That's a little too far for me, to be honest. So those are a couple questions. Moving on. What does her doctor have to say about this? I realize you got HIPAA laws and privacy and all of that. But if we are to consider, well, she had some sort of medical event, what would her doctor say? Of course, I'm telling you all my health issues. I don't mind talking about my health issues to all of you, at least most of them. And, I would say that I'm at 55 years old, that I'm not likely to have a medical event going for a walk. If my cholesterol was way high and the triglycerides were way high and other things and, blood levels or whatever were not good, maybe. And if I was ignoring them, I wasn't taking medication or anything, then yes, that might be an issue. A lot of 50-some-year-old guys having a lot of heart attacks out there. I see that. So what does her doctor have to say about this? What would he say about what are the odds of Abbie Flynn having a stroke? I realize these things can come out of nowhere, but just in general, that might be something that would be interesting to know, because this isn't a situation where we're thinking about, well, she overdosed while she was out there. I've read nothing to suspect that could even be a possibility. So we have to think about other things regarding health. So what does the doctor have to say about all this, if he wants to talk or she wants to talk? What exactly was she cooking? This kind of goes back to what Mary brought up. Who puts food in the oven and takes a walk? What was she cooking in the oven? Of course, a lot of people cook a lot of different things for Super Bowl. If it were Thanksgiving, we could almost put all of our money on the idea it was a turkey. But for a Super Bowl, that it could be anything. It could be chicken wings. It could be turkey. It could be, steaks in an oven. I would not recommend that. but it could be a lot of different things. Well, what was in the oven, and how do you normally cook something like that? And how badly burnt or whatever was it when they got there? That might be helpful. Of course, remember, her phone was left behind. Phone was at the house. So did she normally go walking without her phone? As you would suspect, this seems odd to me. I take my phone everywhere, on the disc golf course, down to the gym, everywhere. But if she's looking to, get away from the phone ringing, and maybe she thinks, well, I just talked to my son. Maybe I talked to my husband earlier in the day. I mean, really, who could be calling me? Okay. In contrast to my dad, who's 89 years old, and he goes places without his phone all the time, maybe because he forgets sometimes. Sometimes, though, I really do believe he just isn't concerned about it. Does she normally go walking without her phone? Another question. We have this eyewitness. You know how I feel about eyewitnesses. We know what the FBI says about eyewitnesses. Are we sure it's the right day? But did this witness just see her? Did this witness talk to her? Does this witness know Abbie? Did the person see her walking that day and say, oh, that's Abbie Flynn? Or was it just, oh, there's a woman walking, and then days later, this person finds out, oh, a woman's missing in the neighborhood, and oh, that's the woman I saw. That is a big difference. So did the witness who saw her know her? Did they talk? It's important. Any problems with neighbors? That might be an interesting discussion too. Nothing that I've read, but we also have to remember that they didn't live there year round. Did somebody new move in next door or across the street? Well, and some neighbor that, a new neighbor that maybe is not copacetic with that, her or something. That might be interesting to know. What about any problems with neighbors? Also, any short-term rentals or Airbnbs. So we have to take a look at that. So she's there for the winter by herself. And I'm sure many of you have read these stories about people using their summer homes and rental units or whatever else for Airbnbs. And sometimes you never know who's going to rent that for all sorts of crazy reasons. So we have any issues with that in this area? I'd also want to know, how long had the party been planned? If she didn't live there, how was this arranged? I would say knee-jerk reaction would be, it seems pretty unique to me that the person who doesn't actually live there, just has a house there, but doesn't live there full time, that's the person who is hosting the party. And these other people who probably do live there, they're going to her house. My perception, just the knee-jerk reaction. But how long had the party been planned? And how did it happen that Abbie was the one who was going to host it? And had she ever done that before? So these are things that come to my mind. Probably if I had some days, I could probably come out with a bunch of other questions that kind of read between the lines on this disappearance. But those are some of the things that come to mind. So let's see what everybody's saying here. Treadmill and Slayer. Heating something on low could be very well for it. Like I said, it would really have to know what she was cooking. Were they ever able to determine her route walking? I just asked that. Brian, they had obviously the dogs brought in, she wasn't found. So I'm guessing no. And Brian, I know you've been around for a while. You know how I feel about that anyway. Even if the dogs say she went, a mile and a half down the road, and then it looks like the dog person says, it looks like she got picked up, I wouldn't take that seriously anyway. But they probably did bring in dogs. All we know is she's still missing, so it mustn't have been very helpful. I don't know. Canines can miss things a lot. LaFord is correct. Why wouldn't the husband be at a Super Bowl party? Was she a big football fan? Yeah. Well, he was, I guess he couldn't get off work, LaFord. She was retired. He wasn't. He's working in Houston, Texas in the medical field, as she used to be in the medical field. And so she goes up there, and he's still there for the Super Bowl. I don't know. Some people might find that suspicious. It's just hard to tell. Once again, need to know the person or persons, the couple, a little better. And Mary's already saying she didn't take a walk. Okay. Mary already calling her shot on this. So those are some questions. Obviously, a couple of you in the comments have come up with a couple of good additional questions. Thank you. But I think we now have a really good flavor, really good idea about this disappearance. We know the facts. We've pointed out some really good areas that probably deserve a more attention to kind of fill in the blanks regarding her, the party, the location. So now let's go to my analysis. I want to first state we have to understand, I think, the timeline, just to really put it in very black and white terms. The Super Bowl, I guess, once again, it can vary, and we know they get these things timed down to the minute. But the guests were supposed to be there at 6. So I'm guessing probably the Super Bowl started. I did not go back and check. 6:30 Eastern. Of course, this is happening all in Eastern time. 6:30 Eastern, maybe 6:45 Eastern, maybe 7 p.m. Eastern. Probably guests get to a Super Bowl maybe an hour before. Of course, it depends on a lot of things. Of course, if it's your team, and maybe people get there hours before and start their drinking and everything else. But maybe for more casual people, let's say that the Steelers meet. Who is it possible that they could meet in the Super Bowl this year? Let's say the Steelers and Eagles play in the Super Bowl. Let's say. We know that their fans, the Eagles and Steelers fans, if they're going to have big time parties, they're probably going to get to their parties a lot sooner than like a half hour before. Whereas people who are Ravens fans or Broncos fans, all the other fans, they may go to a Super Bowl party, but it's like, we'll get there a half hour before, 45 minutes before. Just a difference of behavior. But these guests were supposed to be there at 6 p.m. So let's just say the game was going to start at 6:30, 6:45. But Abbie had a talk with her son at 4 p.m. Eastern, this Brian. And I understand she had some other kids. I don't know where they were. I don't know if we're supposed to be suspicious of them. I don't know. But she talked to her son at 4 p.m. And on that call, of course, we only have his word. He says that she was going to go for a walk. She didn't say where. She didn't say for how long. Maybe she said something about the guest being there at 6. But that's what he says. She is going for a walk. And so, Mary, I know you've already stated, well, she didn't go for a walk. Well, then we have to start thinking, well, is the son lying? Why would he lie? Or was she lying to him? This is how complicated it can get pretty quickly. So she has this call at 4. Allegedly, some witness sees her at 4:30 walking. So maybe that all syncs up. And then when the guests get there at 6, she's not there. I think they quickly realize something isn't right. And I think the police get called in a pretty quick manner on this, on Super Bowl Sunday of 2020. So we have to start thinking, if this is all true, that she did plan to go for a walk, and she knows the guests are getting there at 6. We know this walk could not, her planned walk, if it happened, if this is really true, could not be more than an hour long. All right, she's talking to her son. She gets off the phone. She does something with the oven. She and it maybe goes to the bathroom or something. Uh, you know, it's February in Massachusetts. It's not going to be warm out. She gets her shoes on, coat. Let's say that she leaves at 4:15, and this would then go along with the idea she was seen at 4:30, even though we have to be generally doubtful about eyewitnesses. So I think it's safe to say. So then we have to start thinking our guests are going to be there at 6. She wants to make sure she's back. Maybe she's going to change clothes. What if she works up a little bit of a sweat during that walk or something? I'm guessing that she wants to be back to the house by 5:30. I'm thinking. Of course, we also have this stuff in the oven. That may be a limiting factor. But I think at the longest, we're thinking like an hour and 15-minute walk. Now, what does this mean? The walk could not have been more than a few miles. Maybe 3.5 miles out and back. So if she's at her house and she's just going a straight line, she's going to go 1.75 miles away from her house and then turn around and come directly back. Because we usually say that the average human, if the person is decently healthy, walks about 3 miles an hour. So if she's going to be out there for like an hour and 15 minutes, we have to think like 3 miles, at the most 3.5 miles, somewhere in there. Not far at all. So you're looking at a fairly confined area. You don't have to think about thinking like 10 miles. And of course, it's limited by the water. She could only walk really in one direction if she planned that. Because to go west, it was like a half or quarter mile to the water. To the east, it was like a quarter mile or half mile to the water. And if she went like in a southwest direction, it was only like a mile to the water. So probably what she did was she went the other direction, more inland, maybe. But once again, we'd have to know more about the walk. But I think just looking at this, knowing when the guests were supposed to be there, looking at the call, this walk could not have been more than 3.5 miles, given how fast an adult human would probably walk under normal circumstances. And she's a walker. Nobody said anything about her jogging. Now, if she's jogging, of course, then she's going to get even more, perspirated and not want to be like that when the guest's there. So it still might end up being kind of the same thing. It still might only be 3.5 miles, but she can just do it quicker. So what I would say, so let me see what everybody's saying. Marie says, when my husband had his business, we always lived at separate houses. All right. So Mary kind of going in line with that. Brian says, morning seems more feasible for a walk before a party, not after 4 p.m. Once again, Brian would have to know more about her and her tendencies. What if we find out she wasn't a walker at all and this is the first time she ever went for a walk? What if that happened? So we just don't know. That's why I said we're doing the best with the facts that we have. So we have to also look at some other things. This is, it's in Massachusetts. It's right near the Atlantic Ocean. This is a pretty nice neighborhood. Pretty nice. I'm not saying there's like mansions covering acres in this neighborhood, but we know this is, higher end. Of course, she was in the medical field. Her husband's still in the medical field. They have 2 houses. And so I would say the odds of some murderous type driving through that area looking for someone to attack, probably pretty low. In contra, we might look at a different situation, like Jesse Ross in Chicago. It's 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. He's in downtown Chicago. Somehow he left that hotel for some reason. Of course, some people believe they got picked up. I personally do not, but certainly when it comes to odds, Jesse Ross, it's much higher odds that Jesse Ross got picked up by somebody in Chicago, got abducted, got attacked there, than Abbie Flynn got attacked here. although there's no facts to support or undermine either of those ideas. I would just say the odds of a killer coming along in that area is unlikely, not impossible. And see, this is where, though, we'd like going back to, well, what was going on with some of the neighbors? Do we have any new neighbors? Did we have any Airbnbs? Maybe somebody was renting out a house for a Super Bowl party, as sometimes happens. Maybe that might be helpful. And, did she go by and run into the wrong person? Still, I would say fairly unlikely, not impossible. Or we might look at Morgan Harrington, who got, of course, abducted off the campus of Virginia Tech. Much more likely that she would get abducted on the campus of Virginia Tech outside a Metallica concert than it would be for Abbie being abducted here. Still, nothing says it couldn't happen. What I would also say is, given that this was Super Bowl Sunday, even, of course, it was a Sunday, but even more than usual, you would think that most of these people would be home. Now, granted, maybe some of these neighbors might go to other homes elsewhere, but Super Bowl in the United States is like must-see TV, even for people who are not that much into football. They watch, for the commercials, they watch for the spectacle, they watch for the halftime show. Lots of eyeballs on the Super Bowl, at least in the United States. So you might also have to think that these houses are going to be populated around her. What else do we have to think about? Planning a party can be stressful. So we'd want to know, once again, going back to, did she have it forced upon her? Did she volunteer? Was it somewhere in between? Had she ever held any parties at this building, at this house before? Did you ever, how did she really feel about football and the Super Bowl? As we just got through the holiday season, of course, I didn't have anything to stress about. I didn't have anywhere to be, which is fine with me. But I know for all of you, a lot of you planning, you want to make things just right. And you get anxiety, and somebody's they call in, they're in traffic. Oh, they call in, they're going to be late. Oh, they call and said, oh, one of my kids is sick, I can't make it. It all adds to the anxiety. So this is also what I would want to know. How did Abbie feel about having this party? And of course, on top, we still don't know who these other people were who were going to be joining that party. Were they former co-workers? Were they longtime friends, like from high school, being that she was from there? We don't know. And that would also vary how much anxiety that she might feel. If these are people she really, really, really wants to impress, then the anxiety is going to be up. So I finally get to what I think Mary has already written. The big issue, you go for a walk while you're cooking. Now, once again, it depends on what you're cooking. What I would say is, I'm not much of a cook, but I've done a cooking video for chicken wings. And here's what I know. I would never leave this condo while I'm cooking chicken wings. Cooking chicken wings is dangerous. You have hot oil, bubbling. You really got to watch the thermometer to make sure it doesn't flash over and everything. You can't leave your condo or your house if you're cooking chicken wings in oil. In fact, with me, when I cook chicken wings, I don't even leave the kitchen. I don't even come over and sit here on my couch. I sit over there. If I have my laptop or something, I'll go sit over in the kitchen and watch it and watch the thermometer and make sure nothing goes crazy. But not everything is like cooking chicken wings. Of course, people cook turkeys at Thanksgiving. You almost forget about it. So we'd need to know that. But still, in general, I would say somebody who goes in, does that, really, 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 really wants to go on a walk. Not impossible. We know there's people that are obsessed with walking, and people who will go jogging in the snow when it's 10 degrees out. They just have to do it. They get obsessed with things. This is where it would help to know, well, how did Abbie Flynn really feel about walking? It just seems the circumstances, how many people in the United States that day who were throwing parties went out and took a walk not long before the guests were going to show up? I'm guessing not many. Probably single digit percentage. So this is something. You know, Mary, I don't think you're wrong in what you posted some minutes ago. Like, I'm going to keep coming back to it depends on what she was cooking. But when you figure that you're going to go out walking and maybe you're going to get a little perspirated, you know, maybe a little sweaty, depending on what you're wearing, even if it is chilly out and you're going to have a hat on or something and your hair is going to get messed up. You know, of course, I would, even as a guy, I would worry about that given my hair. It does seem unusual. Have to know more. We also have to consider this, something I've not mentioned yet. It is early February in Massachusetts. It gets dark early. It's going to be getting dark. It's certainly going to be dark before the game starts. So I'm thinking, let's say she leaves at 4:15. She's looking to be back by 5:30. Those last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, probably she's walking in the dark. If that's how long she planned to walk. So the daylight is also a factor in this. You know, could it be she was out there and got hit by a car? I know I usually discount that. A lot of people, you know, say that that's not a very common scenario. But she's out there in this neighborhood. Do they have street lights? You know, what's going on? It doesn't seem like the kind of community that has sidewalks, a little too rural for that. Something to consider. And once again, who goes walk less than 2 hours before your guests are supposed to show up? So I have an idea. Let's see. Not buying. Brian says not taking your cell phone seems odd. It does, especially considering she had people that were going to be coming over. Maybe one of them wants to call ahead and say, hey, we're going to be late. Hey, do you want me to bring this? Do you want me? It seems odd. I agree. Cranky, not buying these casual walk regardless of what was cooking. LaFord, WA's range stove actually on, or was it still warm, but she had finished cooking? It was, whatever it was still cooking. So I'm guessing I think the oven was on, LaFord. That's how I read it. There was something in the oven and it was still cooking. So I'm guessing by the time the guests got there, whatever it was probably was overcooked. Probably. I don't know. LaFord, sorry, was the stove range actually on? I think it was. That's how I read it. Cranky, some emergency type situation pulled her out of her house, or maybe she walked to the store to grab a last minute only. I don't think there are any stores like that in this area. It's pretty upper scale, Cranky. I think if you wanted to go to a local convenience store, you're going to have to drive a few miles. And she does have a car. So if it were, right here in Pinellas County, you're within 1 mile of any convenience store. No matter where you live, you're within a mile of a convenience store. But still, you want to make it quick, you drive. So I have an idea. Could it be that somebody was already there when she was talking to her son? There's no facts to support that. But I don't think there's any reason that I've seen to suspect that this son would make something up. So we have to believe that that's what she said. That doesn't mean she did it. That doesn't mean she went for a walk. All we know is she told her son she was going for a walk. Could somebody have already been there who was instigating or telling this? And maybe telling him this, maybe I'm just thinking about this because there is a disappearance that eventually Unfound is going to feature this year. It's probably going to take a little time, where we can be pretty sure that this guy who called his brother was being forced to do that. Now, it's much more obvious maybe in that situation than what we're talking here with Abbie, but these things do happen. In fact, we might even think about the disappearance of Evelyn Piper, who called her daughter and said, "Yeah, I'm going to Israel to get married." I think it's reasonable to think that she was forced to do that by somebody. So, could we be open to the idea that Abbie was forced to call her son to kind of set this all up by somebody who was already there? And then that would explain why she wasn't there, later, when guests were going to show up. Now, what the counter argument to that would be, well, what's going on here then? There was no signs of a break-in. Seemingly nothing was stolen. Nothing seemed to be out of place, at least by the guests, who got there. And like I said, the houses aren't exactly stacked upon each other, but I think it's reasonable to think of another card pulled in there that somebody might have seen it. We don't have any stories like that, but I think we have to be open to the idea that maybe somebody already was there for whatever reason. Maybe. Now, the other issue is that, of course, health problems, going back to talking to her doctor, health problems can happen at any time. And it very well may be that, when she was talking to her son and telling him she's going for a walk, and it doesn't make any sense to us, could Abbie have already started going into some sort of problems with her mind? And there's two examples. You of course all know Stormy Dorsey. Her brother went missing. He's still missing. She was the guest way back in 2017. She's been very public about her struggles with brain tumors. She was absolutely a healthy young woman, and then all of a sudden she was at some gathering, some party or event, and she collapsed just like that. Boom. Got taken by ambulance, and she's been fighting that ever since, I think for over 6 years now, out of nowhere. And I don't think anybody else in her family has had a brain tumor. So could we be talking about that? And we know that tumors, depending on where they start in the brain, can do all sorts of weird things and make us think all sorts of weird things, even to the point of not being able to think at all. Another example I have is, who would this be? If you can follow this. My brother Michael's wife, her name is Patty, her brother's wife. So my brother Michael's wife's sister-in-law. I know that's a little disconnected, but she lived a very healthy life, was doing very well. This happened, 10 years ago now, maybe longer than that. Healthy woman, forget, maybe she was in her early 60s or something. She started having these subtle headaches, decided she better go to the doctor. She went to the doctor. They weren't sure what was going on. They scheduled an MRI. As she was leaving the doctor, she collapsed. She died a week later of a brain tumor. That's how fast it grew and then killed her. So it happens. I don't know how likely it is for Abbie Flynn, but I'm sure many of you have the same stories in people maybe even that happened to you. These things can come on out of nowhere. That's why we say, cherish every day. Of course, strokes, same way. Aneurysms, same way. And we know sometimes it's very subtle. They don't come on right away like it did with Stormy, where she's fine and then boom, she's in an ambulance. It can come on a lot slower and people don't even know it until it's too late. So maybe this whole thing about walking was more something that was coming into her mind due to something that was going on in her mind. Once again, would have to know more about her walking habits and her health. Moving on, unless the eyewitness actually spoke to Abbie, I'm going to discount it. Did the eyewitness know Abbie, speak to Abbie? We don't know where this eyewitness saw Abbie in this little community. No record of that at all. So I don't know what to think of it. Given that her disappearance was noticed fairly quickly, you'd like to think that, this witness was questioned very quickly within a day or two. So you'd think that that person's memory would be pretty good, but that's not rock solid. And in fact, would need to know more about this witness. We might have to even get so crazy as to think, is this person being a witness because, and giving himself or herself an alibi because maybe this is the person who caused Abbie's disappearance? Maybe. We also have to realize this: if she did walk off and had a health situation, we might be looking at a Daniel Villarreal situation where she stumbles onto private property, doesn't really know what she's doing, stumbles into somebody's work shed or something like that, and it's on private property. There's a lot of private property out there, and I'm going to guess there's quite a few people who probably said, no, you're not searching my private property looking for Abbie. As much as I feel bad for that family, I'm just can't do that. There's lots of private property out there. A lot of people to ask, hey, can we search your property? And I'm inclined to think maybe these people aren't, going to be very open to that. So I think that is still a possibility for this disappearance. If she did have a health issue, didn't know what she was doing, stumbled onto somebody's private property, and the person just hasn't allowed it to be searched yet. This doesn't explain why she went out walking while she was cooking. This doesn't explain why her phone was left behind, but it's something that we know happens. People having health issues. Of course, this is maybe going to be much more common with people like with dementia, Alzheimer's. They go walking off and don't know what they're doing. And, it's not like these are wide open fields and it's all public property where they can just go trampling through and do anything they want. Certainly not. Now, here's one thing I will say. I don't think she went over there and jumped in the water, even though there's water all around that area, unless she was really something went wrong with her mind. I would not buy that as a possibility at all. Even though there's a lot of water around there and some people might default to that, I'm not seeing that at all. Like I said, unless she really had something go wrong with her mind. We talk about the water disappearances that, possible water disappearances that we've featured on Unfound, like J.R. Mullihan, Tiffany Daniels. Then we talk about rivers with Shane Fell, Ben Archer, Jake Latchley. There's quite a few. You could look at every one of those and see why they could have gone into the water. Tiffany Daniels' parents might argue with me. They, of course, don't think she went into the water. But Tiffany was having a lot of problems. J.R. Mullihan having health problems. Jake Latchley, relationship issues, maybe suicidal. Ben Archer, certainly not seeing reality for what it was. Shane Fell might have gotten a head injury while in that car crash, or maybe drunk, didn't know what he was doing, went over that levee, went down to the Mississippi River to take a leak. He falls and he's gone. None of those seem to be comparable to Abbie Flynn. So this is why I'm really, really not thinking that happened. Let's see what everybody else is saying, and then I'm going to get to my final decision here. Some emergency. Hello, Charlie is back. Brian, seems like it could be a neighbor who dropped by for whatever reason that could have been there. Someone in the area near the house. Glenn, thank you for support. What Glenn has done there is hit the support button. He's joined by hitting the join button. Glenn is now get some things that other people don't get and get some things early that people only get on time. So Glenn, thank you so much for your support. Really, really appreciate it. It's good to see you again. D, I was going to say my sister's husband, wife died from an aneurysm at a doctor's appointment. There you go, D. So there is somebody else in the audience who can relate. Here's my final decision. It's not obvious to me that this is a walk-off. I guess her purse was still there. Her purse was still there. Her phone was still there. And let's put it this way. If there was no Super Bowl and there was no party, we know what we'd be thinking, but still, it's not obvious that this is a walk-off. Because why? Because there was a Super Bowl. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is this. If the purse is there, the phone is there, no signs of violence or anything else, no guests coming over or anything, you're thinking it's just a walk-off. This is a woman. We don't know what happened. We don't know why, but that's what she did. But being that this was all supposed to be happening in a very short order, this to me actually lowers the idea that this was a walk-off. But, of course, as Mary and others have already brought up, walking while cooking, left her phone there. Of course, that always gets my attention. And, she wouldn't carry her phone in case, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Maybe one of her other children wanted to call her. Maybe her husband wanted to call her. Maybe one of the guests wanted to call ahead and say, hey, is there anything I need to pick up? Didn't take the phone. Even though she's going for a walk, probably going to be gone at least 45 minutes. If, she's just, because we have to start thinking, what exactly was she trying to prove at this walk? What exactly was the idea? She couldn't skip it. Once she's really walking, she couldn't skip it for one day. And she couldn't have just fallen into the water. So I think what I'm doing, it's either one of two things. Either she had some medical issue and she really didn't know what she was saying and what she was doing, would maybe need to know about medication or something. She had new medication. We know cross-up medications can set your brain going all sorts of directions. It's either that, or I'm open to the idea somebody really did come to the house. Could this be a situation where, given that this house was vacant a lot, that somebody went over there and was going to break in and then found her there? Even though I know there wasn't a break-in, but maybe the person or group showed up and realized, oh, somebody's here, and they were already too, into it, but then somebody's there, or she saw them and they couldn't get away or something because there was no break-in. Of course, nothing got stolen. Did anybody know that she was there by herself? I think what I'm saying is I don't think this is a situation where she was in her right mind, healthy and everything, went out there and something of a medical nature happened. It either already started happening when she was at home, or this is some sort of foul play situation. Of course, unless she just decided I didn't want to be married anymore and I'm taking off and, moving to Las Vegas. But I think it's down to somebody was there and she really didn't go for that walk. She was forced to say that, or there was some medical issue going on with her and she didn't realize it and she just walked off. When really, if somebody had been there who cared about her, would have said, Abbie, you know what? We're not doing this party. I'm taking you to the hospital. I think. Glenn, you will love your membership, LaFord. Yeah, he will. It's a matter of changing the word walk to something that makes more sense. Yeah, Frankie. So I think that's where it is. So I guess overall what I would say, people that are thinking, well, she just went off for a walk and had a heart attack, it seems unlikely. Given, once again, going to walk so shortly before people were going to be there, and the cooking while she's walking and everything. I'd love to cover this on Unfound sometime. Maybe I should put that on my list of things to do, reaching out to somebody in her family. But I just don't think, of course, a lot of people have thought foul play anyway, but not breaking it down the way I did. But foul play may be a more of a possibility than I thought now that I've really looked at this. I still don't know what the percentages are, but and the phone thing and the cooking thing, hard to explain for a woman who was supposed to be in her right mind, in my opinion. So that's where you got. That's where I am. Abbie Flynn. Certainly, if you want more comments and everything, you can do it in the comments section. If you're going to watch this or listen to this later, would love to see everybody's comments posted there after the show is done tonight. And I'll put it on my list. Talked to quite a few people lately, so this would have to get in line. But I'll put it on my list of people to try to contact. We have, obviously, she has grown children. She has at least one brother who's done media. But what I know is none of her family has done any media since 2020, I don't think. So maybe that's a bad sign. So there you go, Abbie Flynn. Let's move on to this doctor. And this is, of course, going to have to be a lot shorter. We're already at 10:30. But I'm going to read this article. A doctor or a dentist and his wife were murdered in Columbus, Ohio. So that's where I'm going next. Police are still searching for suspects nearly a week after a 37-year-old dentist and his wife were found dead inside their Columbus, Ohio home. Spencer Tepe and his wife Monique, love the name Monique for women, by the way, were found suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. Police were first called to the home around 10 a.m. on December 30th for a well-being check after receiving calls from a coworker and then a neighbor in the Wineland Park area. Once inside, officers found two victims, Spencer and Monique, suffering apparent gunshot wounds. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Rob Misley, Spencer's brother-in-law, expressed the family's shock and anger as they try to piece together the events leading to the couple's deaths. Spencer, a dentist known for his larger-than-life personality, was actively involved in the American Dental Association and the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. Monique was a loving mother with a background in childhood education. People described the couple as warm and welcoming, saying you never saw them without a smile on their face. They were so warm. Their place in Columbus was just where everybody gathered. They always had people over, just great people. According to police, there were no obvious signs of forced entry, and no gun was found at the scene. So this was not a murder-suicide. The couple's two young children, aged 1 and 4, were found unharmed inside the home. Parents killed, children untouched. The question is, did the killer know the kids were even there? The brother-in-law emphasized the couple's devotion to their children, and the family had received an outpouring of love and support from both the Columbus and communities. Columbus police have not identified any suspects or made any arrests. They are urging anyone with information to come forward. Of course, this is fairly new from December 30th, last Tuesday. The homicide unit is asking that anyone who may have video, photographs, or other digital evidence related to this incident, including suspicious individuals or vehicles. Police are specifically asking for any evidence from December 30th between midnight and 9 a.m. in the area bordered by Summit Street to North Grant Avenue and East 7th Avenue to East 11th Avenue. I have no idea where that is in Columbus. I don't know if it's location close to the disappearance of Jamie Bowen or Brian Schaefer. I have no idea and didn't look it up, although I did look up the house itself just to kind of get an idea of it. So we have a dentist and his wife who were murdered. It doesn't say where they were. Were they in bed together? Did it happen at 3 a.m? So they're in bed. Somebody comes in, shoots them, leaves the kids unharmed. Were they in separate areas of the house? Was the guy watching TV, and was the wife in the kitchen or something like that? Doesn't say. Doesn't say they were together. Doesn't say they were separate. We don't know. I think a lot of people are going to read the story and think, oh, well, they were together and they were in bed or something. I don't see any facts to support that. So we just don't know. All we know is, and this is where I'm going to start, no signs of a break-in. Now, this house does have a garage. I'm guessing the garage door was down. So we might, like for example, my dad's place up in Pennsylvania, you can open the garage door from the outside, but you need a code. You have to punch in a numeric code and then the garage will open. Could somebody have known that code? Who would be in a position to know that code? But also we might have to be open to the idea, did one of the adults there who were murdered, was there a knock at the door and did they open the door for somebody? What I would say is I think that that's a possibility. But what we'd really need to know is, okay, we know there was violence. 2 people were shot to death. But was there violence otherwise? Was there signs of a struggle? Were there lamps knocked over, broken glass, plates pushed onto the floor? We don't have any information regarding any of that. It very well could be somebody snuck into the house or sneaked into the house somehow, and surprised them, shot one, shot the other. Of course, then there would be little signs of violence other than that. Whereas you would think maybe if, the dentist answered the door, didn't look through the keyhole first, open the door, and then something happens, you'd think that there would be more signs of violence other than just the 2 adults being shot. You'd think, maybe not. I don't know what the interior of the house looks like. We also might have to be open to the idea that this was done by somebody they know. So one of them goes to the door, there's the doorbell, they go to answer it. Oh, it's John Smith. Oh, we know him. And as soon as they open the door, the shooting starts. And that's why there's no signs of a break-in. So there's a variety of possibilities here of why there could be no signs of a break-in. Maybe somebody had a key or something. And then you have to start thinking, well, who lived in the house before that? Of course, they usually change locks when they sell houses to the next person, but maybe not. Maybe not. But I think what I'm also saying here is there's no signs that anything was stolen. There's nothing that says, there's the B word, burglary or robbery, whatever, how they define that. There's no signs that anything was stolen. In fact, it doesn't seem like whoever did this even went through the house, because the person or people would have encountered the children, maybe shot them too. So no signs of a break-in is something. Nothing stolen. So what it does seem then that this was very personal perception. Nothing stolen. It seems the way to get into this house without busting in or anything. It sounds like this was very personal. Somebody had a key, garage door button, or, as I've written here, maybe the police are just trolling us. There's no reason the police have to tell the truth about all this. Maybe there was signs of a break-in, or maybe there were things stolen, and they're keeping that information back as a way to try to keep out people who are going to lie about things. Maybe. That does happen. The other thing is, so somebody with access to the home, at least the way we understand it in the public, got in there, stole nothing, killed the adults, didn't harm the kids. Now, you should also know, and just looking at the location, there are houses on both sides of this house, at least the way I looked at the map. So whoever did this, a bit brash, knowing that probably the houses on each side were occupied. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they're in line for being sold and nobody lives there anymore. I don't know. But I'm just going to take for granted that at least somebody who lived in one of them. You go in, it sounds like these two were shot. Maybe they were slashed. Maybe that, still very personal, somewhat brash, somewhat very forward. Somebody who really wanted to do this. And as I already said, where they let in, but nothing stolen. Now, is there something that this can be compared to? Well, once again, not to get in, I don't do politics here. This is not what I'm saying, but we might remember from a few years ago, remember a representative from California, sometimes the House of Representatives Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. You'll remember that she and her husband were at home. And of course, they live in a pretty ritzy area. They allowed a guy who they didn't know into their house, a guy who obviously was having some mental issues. They might have done so. Did they do so because they were threatened? Was it a mistake that they opened the door? I forget. But it happens. You go to the front door and you just instinctively open up the door, and right away you're like, damn, why did I do that? And of course, I think her husband ended up having some, I think this guy that they let in attacked her husband, I think. But that just shows you, it's just an example of how it can happen. Even for somebody living in a really, really nice area, lots of money, well-known, and still some crazy person gets into the house by choice. They let him in. He didn't break in. So maybe this is what we're talking about. Unfortunately, maybe the dentist and his wife see somebody out there, feel sorry for the guy. Hey, come on in here. It's cold out there. And then this guy loses his mind and shoots them. Because let's admit, you can be too nice. You can be too nice. If you're, as these two have been described, outward going personality, big brothers, big sisters, on and on and on and on, big hearts, wanting to help people. Well, they obviously lived in Columbus, in the city. You're more likely to have homeless people, or whatever we're calling them these days, walking along the streets. And did that Christmas time of giving, did they give a little too much? I think you have to consider that too. And I'm also, in considering that the children were touched, it's very possible that this person didn't even know they were there, which then means the killer really didn't know the dentist and his wife that well. Because somebody, if this were personal, knew the dentist, knew his wife, this person would surely know they have kids. But I mean, can somebody be cold enough to kill adults, but not so cold to kill children? I guess it's possible. Let's say now they are saying, Kathleen, 2 and 5 a.m., no signs of struggle, pretty sure. All right. So we would have to take for granted if it's 2 to 5 a.m., then they were together, and I guess they would have been in bed. But what if, Kathleen, we were to find out that, the dentist was shot in the doorway or slashed in the doorway, and the wife was killed in the bedroom? This then would mean, somebody knocked on the door and he went and opened it up. But then we have to start thinking, would somebody really expect somebody to open a door between 2 and 5 a.m.? You wouldn't think so. You'd think that the person would be like, well, this is weird. What's going on here? And they'd look out. If they have a peephole, they'd look out a window before they ever came close to opening the door. But maybe this person got in a different way. So overall, I think it's very possible this person could have been allowed in, and that's why there's no break-in. It doesn't have to be, well, somebody knew their code, or somebody had a key, or something like that. That it doesn't have to be sneaky like that. It could just be straight out, they let the wrong person into their house. And in fact, I have to tell you, at this point, that's kind of the way I'm leaning. Could it be, as a dentist, of course, dentist bills can get high real fast. And, was there somebody that was getting bothered, owes the dentist money for work that was done and was ticked off at the dentist? Sure. I know. Hey, a few years ago, I spent a ton of money on my teeth. Never wanted to kill my dentist. He was perfectly fine. I don't think he gouged me. I think that what he charges pretty much just what the prices are. It's just expensive. What are you going to do? But some people aren't like myself and, don't have the means to just pay for that stuff. But maybe the work with big brothers, big sisters, maybe some of those kids didn't grow up to be the best individuals and knew where the dentist was and went over there to kill him. Maybe. But I'm thinking that they let this killer or killers in at this point. Disgruntled patient, business associate, affair. Yeah, Amy, you're all possible. All possible. Like I said, disgruntled patient, business associate. A lot of these dentists, of course, have their practices together, sharing profits and expenses and everything. Often, for some reason, maybe he wasn't pulling his weight or wouldn't be allowed to be bought out or something. Or maybe this dentist, the murdered dentist, found out that one of the partners was, stealing money or something. Sure. An affair. I guess that's always a possibility. I think, and very well that maybe that's the reason the person got let in, because either one of them knew the person or something. So we'll keep an eye on that. I often, I'm going to say at this point, I don't have a good feel for these things. Just like going back to Missy Beavers, you'd think that murder would have been solved by now. Still unsolved. So I'm not making any predictions on this. So I think there's still a lot of possibilities for this, is what we're saying. I just don't want anybody to get caught up in somebody must have had a key or something, because there's no signs of break-in. All right. Missing woman identified. And we've got about 13 minutes left. More than 6 years after skeletal human remains were discovered in a wooded area of North Carolina, the victim has been identified as a mom who disappeared but was never reported missing. On Wednesday, December 31st, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office announced that skeletal remains discovered by a hunter in a wooded area behind a former RV dealership in 2019, so over 6 years ago, had been identified as Maria del Socorro Medina Trejo. The location was not far from the home where she lived in Winston-Salem. In a press conference, Sergeant Chris King said that around the time of the discovery, a forensic anthropologist determined that the bones had been exposed to the elements for 4 to 7 months. He went on to reveal that the missing mother had never been reported missing, although he did not provide additional information about her disappearance. The circumstances surrounding Maria's death and how she ended up where she was discovered are still actively being investigated. By December 2022, the Sheriff's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit organization created to help identify John and Jane Does using investigative genetic genealogy. After a DNA profile was created of the unidentified woman, genealogists determined that she was Hispanic. They eventually located a distant relative of the victim who was unaware that anyone was even missing in his family. Fortunately, he was attending a family gathering a few months later and learned that a distant relative was missing. A DNA test taken then confirmed the identity of the remains found in the woods. Born in Zimapan, a town in west central Mexico, in 1976, Maria was believed to be 42 years old when she died. As large questions about her death loom, officials are continuing to search for answers. In a statement, Major Lynn Kuntz emphasized that this is only the first step in bringing justice to the family. He noted that, as with any death investigation, the case will be treated as a homicide until proven otherwise. I guess that maybe, of course, the remains might not show any signs of violence. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office and the North Carolina Office of the Chief Medical Examiner did not immediately respond to people's requests for further comment. Anyone with information about the case is asked to call the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office at 336-727-2112, anonymously text information, photos, and video via text-to-tip at 336-920-8477, or anonymously call Crime Stoppers at 336-727-2800 for English and 336-728-3904 for Spanish. So, I think the reason I brought this up and wanted to look at this is because, of course, first of all, nobody ever reported her missing. It makes it a little hard to solve a disappearance when nobody ever says anything. But I think in reading this story, I think we know why. And I think this is a side effect of the current political climate of people who, are in the United States, but, once again, to stay out of the politics of it, shouldn't be. Or people, who are currently trying to get into the United States and, let's just say we're trying to keep them out. We'll just, once again, trying to avoid, I know this is a very, very hot, one of the most hot button topics in United States politics these days, and I'm looking to avoid it. But I think that what I'm saying here is I do not believe that Maria was an American citizen. And of course, for purposes of disappearances, I don't care. I don't care. What I am saying, though, is this is something I've kind of brought up regarding NamUs, because so many people interested in disappearances have gone to NamUs and said, this should be pretty easy. NamUs has 23,000 listed, people here who are missing. Their names and everything, cities, counties, their height, weight, whatever. And then you have this list of unidentified remains. Well, all you have to do is, take, people from list 1 and try to match it up to list 2. Well, this should be easy. The problem, and that's rarely ever done by anybody. These people get identified usually through science, not by looking at all the missing people and then going over to the unidentified remains. And, we estimate that this person is a white woman, roughly around 25 years old. It's just not that easy. And I've made, why is that? Why is that? And one of the things that I've said is I think that a lot of these unidentified remains are of people who aren't documented as being missing. And the reason they aren't documented as being missing is because they're not American citizens, and people who know that they went missing don't want to go to authorities because it will expose that the person missing and maybe other friends and family have gotten into the United States with no paperwork. Once again, I'm trying, keeping this very general. And this is what happens when we do this, when these people have this kind of fear. I think that if Maria was for sure an American citizen, had been born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to American citizen parents, and she goes missing in North Carolina back in, as best as they can tell, 2019, I think somebody does a report. And I think that she, I don't know what happened here. Very well, maybe she went off into the woods and overdosed or killed herself or something. I don't know. But I think I know if she's an American citizen, it doesn't go this way. And so this is one of the side effects of the way we go about this particular part of enforcing the law in the United States. That we have to get comfortable with the idea that there are people who are who aren't American citizens, who are here for all sorts of reasons. And they go missing for a lot of the same reasons that citizens go missing. And they're not reported. And so we have these remains that are found and they're not identified. And because the people who know these people who maybe are in the same situation are fearful, they don't report it. And then the police get the remains and it just becomes one more headache for them because, well, we got these remains. We don't have a missing persons report to go along with it. That sucks. I'm not saying there's an easy answer to this, but there should be. I realize, I know some people will say, well, they're not supposed to be here in the first place. They're here. And if they go missing, it's hard for me to understand. What if we find out that Maria was murdered? What if they eventually determine that? Because she's probably not supposed to be here, we're supposed to just let it go? Is that what we do? Allow people to just freely be murdered in this country just because they're not American citizens? We just let it go? Oh, we're not going to do that. They're not supposed to be here. Oh, well, they shouldn't have been here. That's not the kind of country that I really want to live in. But it starts with a fear that probably is well warranted. But this is all it does is, if some of these people who are missing and the remains are out there were murdered, what do the murderers learn? Whether they're citizens or not, what do they learn? I can kill certain groups of people and I can get away with it because nobody's ever going to report them missing. And so what do you have? You have a bunch of killers just roaming around the United States and getting away with it. And that, because you know what? People who can kill non-American citizens, you know what they can do? They can also kill American citizens too. So this is what caught my eye regarding this. This kind of reminds me of the disappearance of Nancy Troche Garcia. Of course, her car is missing too. She was an American citizen. I guess once again, she wasn't supposed to be here. And that's made it very tough for her family to get any sort of justice here. You remember, well, what's that? That was the episode that we did in Spanish. It was the only Unfound episode that you can also find in Spanish. I appreciate former assistant Natasha of putting that together. So that's where I wanted to go with that tonight. As far as Friday is a little up in the air right now. Working on, I've talked to quite a few people. It's really been good so far. Just been hard lining up some things. So I will just throw out two names. It could be either one or maybe neither. We just don't know right now. Working on it. Friday's either going to be the disappearance of Thomas Doolan, Doolan, or it's going to be the disappearance of James Lacouture. Yes, Lacouture. So maybe you want to start looking either of those up. Going to be trying to make one of those interviews happen. The guests already have the interview, the outlines. They just have to come together on a good time. And as you can imagine, everybody's getting back to school. The holidays are over. It's a little bit of a turbulent time. But you can start looking those up. Either one of those will be this Friday. Anything else? It's 10:59. Anything else I want to get into? Oh, you can pretty much guarantee that myself and John Lorden will be collaborating this year. I've picked out a disappearance. It's a doozy. And given that I think there is so much to do, I probably could do it myself, but he and I, over the last 2 months, have talked about, with Jason Landry, what we did with Jason, working together. So this is one that probably we're going to split up. I'll work on half of the disappearance. He'll work on half of the disappearance because there's surely enough to do. And then we'll both do coverage of it, splitting it up, something like that. So I'll throw that out there. And I've already taken notes from talking to this person's a family member. Like a lot to do, a lot we're going to have to get into here to kind of sort things out. I can't tell you what it is right now. But there you go. That's it for tonight. Thank you all for making time. Hit the thumbs up button before you leave. Do not end up on my podcast. So please keep your heads on swivels out there. Be safe here in 2026. And Charlie, say hi to your sons for me. We'll do this all again. We will not be doing this next Monday. Next Tuesday is when I will see you all again. Good night.